Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. My name's Craig DiMartino. We actually go to Foundations. We come to the 11 o'clock service, so I know what it's like to miss everything from the first two services. We miss it all the time, too. So I was raised, probably like many of you in this auditorium, I was raised that, my folks taught me, you're going to go through your life, you're going to be in a set of circumstances that will then define you as a person, and that person will be who you are in your life. And I believed it, and that worked for me for most of my life. That was, circumstances were happening, I was reacting to those circumstances, and I was the person that I was going to be. But about 11 years ago, I ended up in a set of circumstances that I never had anticipated. I never had seen them before. I had never even known anyone in that kind of circumstance before. And so what I was learning through that process and through that very hard process was that the circumstances were constantly changing. And so the circumstances, whether they were good or they were bad, they were fluid, and they weren't ever staying in one spot. They were moving around. And what I kept seeing was that they were part of this plan that God had set in motion, that I knew very little about, but that plan was changing. That plan was how I identified myself. And so the circumstances, I went from the circumstances defining me, because the circumstances were horrific, to me defining me, and me defining me through what I felt was this purpose that God had in my life, this plan that was in place. And the plan is in place for everyone sitting in this room. It's not just me, it's not just this gentleman, it's everyone is part of that plan, whether you're in it or not, whether you see it or not. Those circumstances aren't defining you. Those circumstances are changing. So whatever you walk through the door with today, it's not going to be like that tomorrow. It might be something better, it might be something worse, but those circumstances are going to change. And once I realized that the circumstances weren't defining me, I was defining me, and I was defining myself by what that plan was in my life. Now, to go into those circumstances, I have to back up a little bit. And my family and I have been in this area for about 20 years. I've been married to Cindy for 17 years. Actually, next week is our anniversary. You can cheer, that's a good thing. And I think we're going to make it. She keeps saying, I'm not sure we're going to make it. It's another week. Been Maya and Dad's dad for 14 years. Maya and Will are 14 and 12, respectively. They're coming up on birthdays. And we do a lot of stuff together. We travel together. We go everywhere outside together. We do a lot of stuff outside, so camping, climbing, skiing, mountain biking. We do a lot of things together. We've always done things together, and we've always enjoyed being outside together. And about 23 years ago, I started to rock climb. I went to a bachelor party of all things, and they took us rock climbing instead of the usual bachelor climber stuff, which I won't get into here. But it resonated with me immediately. And so 23 years ago, I started down this path, and so you can do that math in your head. I started climbing when I was like 1.5 or 2 years old, and it's not funny. And so it just kind of reoriented my life to it. I was living in Pennsylvania at the time. I came out to Colorado. I actually was out in Yosemite climbing, came back through here, and just fell in love with this area and all the climbing in this general area. And so started to pursue it on a regular basis, 5-6 days a week, climbing all over the place. I met Cindy in a climbing gym in Pennsylvania, and so we've climbed together our whole marriage. Our idea of a date night is we go climbing and get a burrito. I mean, we've done that for 17 years now. So it's just, we enjoy climbing together. She's one of my favorite climbing partners. And so she has been with me through this entire journey, as well as the kids. But through that journey, I ended up in a situation, in a set of circumstances that were out of my control. So some of the circumstances I see being in my control, some of them are not. And I ended up 11 years ago in a set of circumstances that looked completely different than what I was used to. And what I was looking at was something like this, and which was something that I'd never even anticipated. I had never been around that before, and I was in a set of circumstances that were so horrific and dire. Like from dying, almost given an hour to live, to paraplegic, to amputee, to disabled the rest of my life, to having all this chronic injury stuff. I was here. I wanted to go back to where I was. I wanted to go back to climbing, to what I knew, but I had no idea how to get there. I had no idea what that looked like. I had no idea what that path was. I had no idea God was even in that mix, because I wasn't looking for it. All I knew was I was in a world of pain and confusion, And I was trying to just sort out where I was going, how to get there, and what I was supposed to do with all this wreckage that I had in my life now. So to take you to that set of circumstances, I have to take you to this big cliff here. This is Rocky Mountain National Park. This is Sundance Buttress. It sits up above Estes Park. It's a 1,000-foot granite dome. It's a beautiful climbing area. And my buddy and I had been kind of going around the park all summer, kind of climbing these different routes that we had heard about. And there was a route out there that we wanted to try. So as we were walking in, it's about a 4 or 4.5 mile walk in. We're walking in, and climbers have terminology just like every other sport in the world. And one of the terms we use is top roping. So top roping is the way I understand it, is I climb up to a ledge or an anchor system. I clip into that anchor, then I am lowered to the ground. I belay my friend from the ground. That person goes up and down. Then I go up and down. We take turns doing it as much as we want. That's top roping in my mind. And so when we walked in, I didn't feel the need to clarify that with Steve. He's an old partner of mine, great friend of mine, climbed together for years. Tied into the rope, started off up the climb, and 100 feet later get to a ledge about 3 inches wide by about 4 feet long. And there's a couple bolts drilled into the rock, which climbers put there as anchors. And I clipped into those anchors. And what I have to do then is I have to get the rope ready to lower me. So I run that through a couple carabiners, or quick draws is what we call them. Make sure it looks good. And what I told Steve at that point when I was rigging all that was that I was off belay, which is again is a very normal climbing term. And that means that I'm clipped in directly to the rock and I'm safe. And he can take me out of his belay device and do whatever he needs to do. Then he'll put me back on his belay device and lower me to the ground. I get everything ready. The climb was super steep, so I couldn't even see him. So he had walked over to about where the guitar is to get his shoes. Totally normal. And I got the rope ready. It looked good to me. So when I was ready to be lowered, I said, okay, Steve, I'm all yours. Again, because we climbed together so much, our terminology was a bit lax. It wasn't as textbook as it should have been, but we understood each other very clearly. And so he heard me say that. So what Steve was thinking, and this is where it derails. This is where the miscommunication kicks in. He thought, for some reason that day, he was going to second the climb, come up to the ledge with me, and then we would rappel off together. That was his idea of top roping that day. And again, we never clarified that. So when he heard that, he said, okay, good. I heard, okay, good, meaning Steve is now ready to lower me to the ground. So I pulled into the anchor, looked at it one more time, made sure it was running smoothly, unclipped everything, sat back on the rope and started to fall. And I started to fall quickly, but climbing and falling go together. It's part of the game. So when you're climbing and you're climbing harder and harder routes, you push yourself further and you want to get better. So you fall, but you fall on the gear, you fall on the rope, everything works, it's great. Well, when you fall and you start to pick up a lot of speed, you know something's wrong. And so my first reaction was push to get away from the rock because it was so steep and I wanted to see where I was gonna hit. I wanted to see what I was gonna land on. So that's a good thing to push to get away, but what it does is it pushes me and tips me. So now I'm falling horizontally and I'm going down towards the talus blocks, which are 100 feet below me. So 100 feet, if you're not a climber, is basically a 10-story office building. So imagine standing on the side of a 10-story office building and then stepping off backwards. And you're falling straight down at about 52 to 55 miles an hour. And now you're tipping sideways. And so if you hit the ground sideways, you're gonna die on impact because your head's gonna hit, your body's gonna get smashed. You're not gonna survive. But about 20 feet from the ground, there was a dead tree. And I walked around that tree to get to the climb. I didn't pay any attention to it. But now, coming down at that rate of speed, the tree hits me in the head, stands me back up to standing. And I land on my feet, pretty much like I'm standing here today. Now the good news is, I landed on my feet. And the bad news is, I landed on my feet. And they exploded. And so, this long overview is a big list of the injuries that I sustained. I compound fractured both my talus and my heel bone, which is your calcaneus. I ended up with a mini medical degree. And what happened is they compound fractured, so they came out the inside of my legs, and that resulted in me severing the artery in my right leg, so I was bleeding really badly. I broke my back at L2, which is kind of straight through your belly button here, and I broke it so badly that it just disintegrated and sat down on itself and sprayed into my spinal canal. That shockwave went up, broke the ribs on my right side, punctured the lung on my right side, tore the rotator cuff on my shoulder, broke the bursa sacs in my elbow, sat my neck at C6, which is straight through your Adam's apple here. And then I crumpled down on the talus blocks, which are the blocks at the base of the cliff, which have fallen off over the years, and some are the size of dishwashers, some are the size of cinder blocks. And I'm laying in those. And my friend keeps his act together. He runs over. He tries to stop some of the bleeding in my leg and knows how screwed up I am, knows how badly I'm hurt. We devise a plan. I'm wide awake. We're talking how we're going to get me out of there. He has a cell phone. He's able to get a signal. He calls 911. And he's able to start a rescue within 45 minutes of me hitting the ground. 5 hours later, they get me to a clearing, get me in a helicopter, and take me to Poudre Valley Hospital in Fort Collins, where this line of miracles, this is where I kind of see God step in a big way in my life. Well, as they're bringing me in, not only does the rescue go smoothly and quickly, two of the best neurosurgeons are trading shifts, and they end up working on my spine. So they decompress it, and then they fuse it. So I have these cool bars and screws in my midsection here for 3 levels, and then they fixed my neck as best they could. My feet were so blown out that they basically just put a bunch of hardware in, and they were going to amputate both of them. But I had lost so much blood, they couldn't. So they basically just got the hardware in there and then bandaged them, moved me to ICU, because I went from an hour to live, that's what they told Cindy when she came in that night, to we're just going to see what happens. So they put me in ICU. Cindy has to wait and wait and wait. I'm on a ventilator because I can't breathe. And I wake up there. That's where I come to next. And I am in a world of just pain, confusion, and just terrified because I have no idea what's going on. I can't communicate, I can't move, I can't do anything. And my wife and my doctors were my circle of influence. That's all I knew. They were telling Cindy all this stuff, he's going to be a paraplegic, he's going to lose his legs. The list of things he damaged, he's going to be wrecked his whole life. Now, she's not telling me that, and they're not telling me that. They give you small pieces of information, but I'm processing what they give me and trying to make sense of it, and I'm not making any sense of it. It's just very confusing and scary. So you slowly come out of that fog, and I moved slowly, and 2 weeks into it, they moved me into orthopedic care. Orthopedic care is a step-down unit from ICU, and I'm there, and I'm starting to process a little bit of what's happening to me. Still very confused, and again, there is no God in my life at this point. I am just extremely confused and dealing with a lot of pain and just trying to sort that out. Now, I have a lot of downtime because I literally can't do anything on my own. I can't sit up or roll over or do anything. Lift me out of bed with a crane. Everything has to be done for me. I'm completely dependent. And so I would sit there and kind of talk to God on my own and in my head and try to sort it out in my head, but the circumstances were so horrific to me, I couldn't get my head around them. And they were so bad and seemed like they were going to be bad forever, and I couldn't get my head around that. And so I couldn't really see God in that mix of things. And so I kept slowly recovering to a point where they would put me in a wheelchair, and I could sit in a wheelchair for about 20 minutes at a time. And I could kind of make my way around, but again, when I was in bed, all I could do was lay there. And so one day I was bored and alone, and I reached out to a bedside table because I could reach just a little bit over. And someone, people had sent me books, and our support network was amazing. I could reach this one book, which the only book I could reach was this daily devotional book. And in a full disclosure, I hated those things. I thought they were silly. I never understood why you would read them, and of course, that's the book I can reach, so I'm like, great. So I get it, I open it, and it's a Max Lucado book that, again, I had never seen before, and I thought, well, this will be kind of funny. I'll look at it for July 21st, which is the day I fell, and this is what the chapter was. Getting our attention. And I thought, this took me from when people used to say to me, and I would hear this in churches, I heard God talk to me, or I heard God say something to me, I would run from them, because I thought they were insane. To all of a sudden, I should probably pay attention, because this is what I'm reading, and it's telling me that this is going to happen to get my attention. God's going to do what He has to do to get my attention, and now He fully has my attention for sure. And so I just shut down, stripped it all down, and said, okay, look, I am completely confused here. I'm not angry, but I don't understand what's going on, what I'm supposed to do, and so if you want me to do something, you need to sort this out and give me a plan, give me a path, show me what you want me to do, and I'll do the best I can. The one thing I did, which I will caution you against, was I tried to negotiate with God. Never works, because what I said that day was, I will do whatever you want, but one little thing I won't do is I don't want to stand on a stage and talk to people about my faith. I'm still waiting. And so I kind of kicked back and I said, okay, I don't understand these circumstances that I'm in. I don't. I'm completely confused. I don't know if my legs work. I don't know what's going on. But I do understand that you're directing me, and I understand that there's a plan in play here, and I understand that I'm part of that. So now just make it clear to me. And so that circle of influence I had, what it started to do is grow out from that. From me just relegating that power over to God and saying, I don't understand this, so you take care of it. All of a sudden, those circumstances began to change. And those circumstances in that circle of influence got bigger and bigger. Now, my life was going to look really different because my leg was healing. I went home after 3 months. I was home. I was rehabilitating myself over that next year. And for 16 months, I was wearing a cast on my right leg. And basically, the doctor said to me, look, that's it. 11 surgeries later, you've got hardware in your leg up. I mean, it's never going to get out of a cast. You're not going to climb again, you're not going to ski again, and you're not going to mountain bike again. And if you hit your leg hard, it will shatter. And so my quality of life went from, here to here. And I wasn't psyched on that. I was trying to get my head around this new life that I was supposed to have. And after interviewing different people, different athletes who had amputated their legs and getting my head around that, which was huge. I mean, Cindy and I talked about it for days and months, just trying to, okay, if I do this, what's it look like? But I kept coming back to, okay, if I can go back to climbing, I want to decide to do that. I don't want the accident to decide that. In other words, I don't want those circumstances from the accident to say, this is who you are now. I wanted to define myself. And I wanted that definition to come from God's plan in my life. And so at 18 months, I went back in and amputated my leg below the knee. About 3 months later, I was walking again, and about 6 months later, I was starting to dabble again in climbing. And that process was really slow. It was a very slow build-up to climbing because I didn't trust it, and I was obviously very scared and terrified some days. But I slowly went back to it because, again, God just kept putting people in my path and opening doors for me. I'd love to say that I had this huge, great list of, okay, this is how I'm going to do things. But it wasn't that. It was God just putting the right people in my life, opening the door, and I would step through the door. He'd open another door, I'd step through that door. And it was just that process over the years that kind of directed me back to climbing. Now, Cindy has always been a climbing partner of mine, and one of the most empowering things she said to me in the hospital was, if you want to climb again, I totally get that. But if you don't want to climb again, I totally get that too. You need to decide that. You need to sort that out, and then I'll support whatever you want to do. And so it allowed me to decide how I was going to do it. And these people started to bubble up in my life, and this guy was one of them. His name's Hans Florine. He's widely regarded as one of the fastest climbers in the world. He holds several speed records in Yosemite. He's climbed El Capitan, which is the largest granite monolith, in under 3 hours, which most people, a respectable time on El Cap is 6 days. He's done it in 3 hours with another friend of ours, his name's Alex Holland. And so these guys know how to climb fast. And I was going to climb in a speed comp. I was kind of getting used to climbing again, and there's a comp in Florida I was going to go to, and he's really good at it. So I called him up on the phone, and I was like, hey, this is what I'm thinking of doing. Can you give me some pointers? And he felt me out, and I felt him out. And at the end of the conversation, he says, look, here's what you need to do. You need to come to Yosemite, where I live, and we'll climb El Cap together. And by the way, what we should do is, since no one-legged people, he calls me One-Leg Craig. That's our little nickname. He said, no one-legged people have done it in a day. You should be the first one. This would be rad. Come on out. Now, I am just naive enough to think that's a good idea. So I'm thinking, as I'm sitting in my wheelchair doing wheelies, this is a great idea. I'm going to go out to California and meet up with him. And so I talked to Cindy. We pack up the kids and Sin, and we go to the valley in 2006 in June, and I meet up with Hans. El Cap is the feature on the left there. It's the largest feature in Yosemite Valley, and like I said, it's 3,300 feet tall. Good, respectable time on the Captain is, anywhere from 4 days to 6 days. You sleep in portaledges on the side. You kind of work your way up through the features of the cliff, and they go from cracks to huge blocks, and you just kind of work your way up. And we are going to take a line up on the left side. They're kind of straight in the center. It's called Lurking Fear, which I still think is a funny name. He thought it was hysterical. I just didn't really see the irony at all, but he thought it was fantastic. And so we start up this route at 6 in the morning. And again, the last time I climbed El Cap was 6 days, 5 nights. So he's saying, yeah, don't worry about it, we're going to top out. at some point under 24 hours. So we take off, and on El Cap you lead in blocks. And so what you do is, because the climb is so long, you lead in time blocks. And so I go first for 2 hours, then he goes first for 2 hours, and you just leapfrog all the way up the cliff like that. And we just kept plugging along, and you follow these features, you follow the cracks that sometimes they go horizontally, sometimes they go vertically. You get in these massive dihedrals, and you just kind of keep plugging your way up to the top. And the next thing I know, 14 hours later, we're standing on top of El Cap. Now, this is totally normal for him. I'm standing, my mind is blown. I'm just standing there going, oh my gosh, we just did that in 14 hours. I was certain when we started we were gonna die. I thought, we're both the rope's gonna, all this stuff's going through my head. And of course I don't tell him that, but he's like, oh, that was really fun, wasn't it? Okay, we're out of here. So we wrapped the route, but it kind of opened my eyes and it made me think, okay, so this is what we can do. And I have this weird curiosity. I've had it my whole life, and it's kind of what sets me in motion to do things, is I don't think like it would be cool to do that. I just think, I wonder if I can do that. And sometimes I'm successful and sometimes I'm not. And in climbing, I've been able to teach myself how to do things, and over time I'll kind of wear them down so I can finally do them. And so this was a new step for me. This was a big step for me, where my body was so still messed up. Lots of chronic pain. I still deal with that to this day, but I can manage it. But this was like a whole nother animal. And he kind of opened my eyes, and I came back from the valley with this idea of doing these climbs that I had done previously as an able-bodied climber. I wanted to repeat them as a disabled climber. No one had ever done it before, and so I didn't have a lot of people to ask about, but I just thought it would be really cool. I wondered, I wonder what that would look like. So I came back, and a lot of the climbs were here on the Front Range. Bouldering is something climbers do. You climb on buildings and bridges, and I would never advocate trespassing or anything like that, but you end up trespassing and doing all that fun stuff. But it's a church, and you guys have to be nice. So went back, and I love bridges, so builded a bunch of bridges and buildings, and went up to Horsetooth Reservoir, which is right near here, in Carter Lake, and there were climbs that I could go back and repeat quickly, like maybe a month. I would have to figure out how the prosthetic worked and how my back worked and my neck, and just how my body would move again, but I could figure them out. And so some of them I was met with success right away. Other ones, it took me months, years of me just beating myself up again and again and again. But in this weird, odd curiosity that I have, it's fun to me. It's fun to me to kind of get broken down again and figure out what's going on. Because again, through this whole process of this list, God kept putting these people in my life who would motivate me, who would be my catalyst to move me forward. A lot of times it was Cindy, her just saying, yeah, you should go do that one, or repeat this one, and that would be cool. And I would jump on that train and go. But other times it would be other climbers, it would be partners that I had climbed with all over, and they would direct me towards different areas, and then back to Yosemite Valley. And Yosemite is my sweet spot. It's one of my favorite places to climb in the country. And this climb in particular, what I learned early on was that crack climbing, which is when you climb the actual crack, and prosthetics don't go together. You may not believe this, but prosthetics are not engineered to be climbing apparatuses. They're made to walk. And all of a sudden you're stuffing them in cracks, and what happens is they get stuck. And so there was this weird learning curve of getting it stuck, getting it unstuck, then going crazy with it, and then getting it stuck again. And so this process of relearning how to be a climber and how to be an athlete who could do these things was a very long, fun process. But it was this cool around the country process. I went all over trying to do these climbs, and as I started to get near the end of the first list, which was 10 climbs, I kept bubbling back to Yosemite and thinking, I wonder if there's been a disabled ascent of El Cap, like with not an able-bodied climber and a disabled climber, just all disabled people. And I called Hans up. He's a really big valley historian, and he's like, no, it's usually how we did it, you and me, and that's how it's done, and you should do it. You should get a team together. So I kind of it got in my head, and it started to kind of build as an idea. And as I neared the end of the list, this is in El Dorado Canyon, I started to feel more solid as a climber, and started to feel more confident, and went back to the valley and started to kind of hone my crack climbing technique again, because again, you follow, for 3,000 feet, you have to follow the crack systems, and so you have to be as solid as you can be. And I dug around and figured out this one friend of mine who I had met many, many years ago. His name's Jerem Fry, and Jerem is a cancer survivor. He lost his leg when he was 12, and so he's above the knee, so his leg is cut off up to here. I'm below the knee, so they call me a BK, and they call Jerem an AK. And Jerem calls anyone with a BK, he calls that a flesh wound. And he calls his a real disability. But Jerem suffers from the same naiveness that I have and the same curiosity. So I call him up. Jerem has never climbed more than 160 feet in his life at that point. I call him up and say, hey, meet me in the valley. We're going to climb El Cap together, and we'll be the first disabled party. What do you think? And he's like, that's a great idea. So he loads up his car, we fly out there, and we meet. And we had a film crew come with us because they, I think, thought it was kind of funny that two disabled guys were going to try to climb El Cap. And this will give you a little window of what El Cap looks like while you're sitting on it.
But that's pretty much always the case with big falls. 20 years ago, this would have seemed like an impossibility for a group of amputees, but they are moving steadily towards their goal.
Now when you let it go, just kind of slowly let it go as long as you can hold it. If you're having fun and you're enjoying the people you're with and the places you're at, you're winning. You're ahead of the game.
Alright, I got it on the meter, so you can go up about 6 feet and look like this that way.
Just as they are gaining momentum, the one hurdle Craig hadn't imagined happens.
Now, I still laugh at that too. In the things that you're gonna bail off a wall for, your buddy's leg falling off is right at the top. It's like death, leg falling off. And so Jerem's leg falls off, he gets stuck in a sling. We get together at the belay, he looks at me and I look at him and he just says, we're done. And I knew we were done. And I'm just like, oh, we've just been beat up for 2 days, now we're gonna go down. And retreating a wall of this size is quite an endeavor. You have to rappel everything and lower all your bags. It's a hassle. And so we get down a bunch of hours later, and not only do we retreat the wall, he looks at me once we get down and he says, look, I just talked to my wife. You need to take me to Sacramento and get me out of here. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. So we hump all the gear out, get in the car, drive to Sacramento, get a cheap hotel. He flies out at 4 in the morning. And I'm left by myself, and this failure is so big to me, it just felt overwhelming, because I had prepared for a year training for this thing, and getting ready, and getting the logistics dialed, and then we get out there, and we just get served, and just beat down, and my foot is smashed up, my hands are just busted up, and I just feel terrible, and I'm thinking, you know what, this maybe isn't part of this plan that I see God laying out. Maybe this is just me trying to strong arm it and saying, this is what I want to do, and me making this part of God's plan, but maybe it's not that. And these circumstances are pretty severe for me, so I'm just not gonna go back to this. I'm gonna leave. And so I call Cindy early in the morning and I say, hey, look, we didn't do it, and I'm gonna get a ticket and fly out of here. And she's like, no, you probably shouldn't do that. Just call Hans, call your buddies in the valley, go back to the valley, climb something big, and then come home. Because if you come home now, you're gonna be miserable. It's gonna eat at you, you're gonna be cranky, and I have to live with you. So go back. And so again, she's that big catalyst person for me. So she kicks me back into the valley. I meet up with Hans and I call him on the way in and I tell him what happened. And he's like, oh, it's such a bummer. He's like, but I got a great idea. So no one's climbed the nose of El Cap, which is the straight line up the front of the Captain. It's 3,000 feet tall. Again, 6 days is a respectable time, 4 days is smoking fast. Hans has done it in 3 hours. He says, no one-legged people have done that. You should do it. So meet me. So I go back and meet with my friends. We climb for a while. And Hans and I take off after a rest day and take off up the nose at 6 in the morning. And El Cap is so immense. Like that little person running across, that's me. And these features are huge. They're bigger than this auditorium, and you're just going between these huge features and these corners and these cracks. And it's an amazing process, and it's a place that I feel super comfortable, and it's actually one of my just very, very happy places when I'm up there. I'm psyched to be there. I don't mind getting beat up. It's just one of those things that's really fun for me. And we keep following the crack systems to the top, and El Cap is weird, like, cause so you're on this thing we're going for an in-a-day ascent. You meet other people on these climbs, because there's other people up there who are doing it for 6 days. And so, you come across other parties and you talk and you hang out. And one of the groups had read one of Hans's books, so we had like a little autograph photo session at one thing, and then get a little hard. He got a haircut under a roof up there, because no one had ever done that before, and he's way into first, so he gets his haircut. So you meet this whole other culture while you're out climbing, and it's phenomenal, it's hysterical. And so 14 or 13 hours later, we top out the nose. And I think, oh man, I can do these things. God's putting people like Hans in my life, but I don't know, the disability thing, I just don't know if I can find another partner like that. And he almost reads my mind and says, you can do this. You just need to find the right people. And so the failure was so kind of fresh in my head, though. I wasn't psyched on doing it again. I wasn't psyched on going back, and I left the valley. And the failures come from, like, I wish I could say they only come from climbing, but they come from me at these different avenues that I would never expect. And about a month ago, we went to Costa Rica to surf, and I'm not a surfer. In fact, water and I don't get along well at all. And my kids wanted to learn to surf, so we go down there and we get them a surfing instructor, and I get a surfboard, and we go down there. And about day 5, I'm having like marginal success. It's fun. I'm not drowning, which is a good thing. But my kids are with Kim, their instructor, and they're in front of me, and they're about 25 yards in front of me, and I'm behind them paddling up on the wave. And so when you surf, you paddle, 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 you put your hands down, and then you kick your foot through and you stand. So when I had done that for 5 days, and like I said, moderate success and everything was fine, but when I kicked through on that particular wave, I had this really unique sensation. And the sensation was my leg being sucked off the back of the board because of the suction of the wave. So my leg, the liner, everything, right off the back. And I dropped down to the board as fast as I could, and I turned, and all I see is a wave. The water in Costa Rica is dark. It's not like Caribbean water. My leg is black. It is gone. It is into the Pacific Ocean, and I can't see it. And so now the wave's momentum pushes me forward, and I'm up kind of where Maya and Will and Kim are. And I look at Kim as I'm going past, and I go, Kim, do you see a leg? And he looks at me, and he's like, oh, seriously? And he starts doing this. And I'm past him now, so he gets the kids, and everybody kind of follows me, and I paddle in, and I crawl, well, I get to where the water's shallow, and I start to crawl. And I crawl out of the ocean, and my wife sees me crawling out of the ocean, which is not the preferred exit strategy of leaving the ocean, so she knows something is wrong, so she comes running over, and I say, I lost my leg, and she's like, oh, and she runs into the ocean. So now everybody drops their stuff, they go, and I have Maya, Kim, and Cindy and Will are out there looking, and they're all going back and forth. And so in my head, I'm sitting there going, okay, I'm in the middle of nowhere. We're in this little town called Nassau, which there's nothing around, and I'm thinking I have to get crutches somehow. I have to get through the airport, get back to the States somehow, get a leg made, explain this to insurance, because they're gonna say, where's your leg? And I'm gonna say, it's in the Pacific Ocean somewhere. Good luck with that. And so I'm trying to figure this out in my head, and about a half hour goes by, and they're trying to find my leg in the Pacific Ocean. It's a needle in a haystack. And all of a sudden, Maya and Will are kind of off to my right, and I see Maya dive under. And she comes back up, and she's holding my leg. And she's holding up, and Hera and Will are jumping around cheering. And I'm looking, and like, as any dad who would be proud, I yell over to her, and I go, that's not my leg, drop it, go find mine. And she just looks at me, and she's like, whatever. And she just comes over. And they're very used to I'll call it a sense of humor, my sense of humor. And so the failures come like weird ways like that. Like, I would have never predicted that one, but again, oddly enough, it's strange. And even Kim said, he's like, wow, I never had that one happen in surf instructing school. And came back from the valley, and like I said, I was kind of not excited to go back. So the failure to me felt really big. It was like, I felt like my body was as good as it was going to get, and we failed pretty badly, and so what do I do? And so about 2 weeks go by, and it starts to kind of bubble in my head and fester, and it's like Cindy said, I get cranky and miserable, and then I'm like, I gotta go do this. And so I start to make plans again, and I call up a new buddy. He's in the middle there, his name is Pete Davis, and Pete was born without his arm below the elbow. And the funny thing about Pete is no one told Pete he doesn't have an arm. And in fact, to this day, I don't think he knows. And he climbs, he kayaks, he mountain bikes, he's a skier, he's an amazing athlete. And he has no idea he's missing an arm. He just does everything he wants to do. And we spoke to Jerem at length over the year and said, look, we're gonna go back. I'd love for you to come back. What do you think? And initially he wasn't psyched, and then he was psyched. And we all met up in the valley last season in June. And we decided to come on the other side of El Cap, the steeper side of El Cap. So we wanted to do something for Pete and I, which would be harder, and for Jerem would be steeper, so his leg wouldn't be dragging. And our thought was, well, hopefully his leg doesn't get knocked off again, and we can get up this thing. And you don't know if you're going to succeed on walls like this because they're so big. We weren't going to try to do it fast. We were going to plan on 5 days, 4 nights, and so we started up, and we call it vertical camping. Vertical camping because you carry everything. You carry your bed, you carry your food, you carry your water. And it's heavy, and hauling is miserable. But we slowly make our way up there. And again, it's one of my happy places. I love hanging out with my partners. I love the process of climbing. And, oh, sorry, wrong way. I like the process of climbing, and I like the process of moving higher on the cliff, and I like that you're committing to it, and I really enjoy that part of the process, because as you get higher, you end up, there's no ledges on El Cap on some sides, which on the right side there are none, so you live in a portaledge, and so you stand in a portaledge, you sleep in a portaledge, you sit in a portaledge, and you climb for 8-10 hours a day, set up the portaledge, hang your feet over the side, in my case it's a foot, and you eat your dinner, you go to bed, you get up, you do it all again, and I love that process. I love the simplicity of that. And so we kind of just kept making pretty good progress, and Pete and I were trading leads. Jerem wanted to just stay between us. He didn't want to lead anything, so we could control kind of what his leg was doing. And so as we got higher and as we got closer to the top, you start to really figure out, okay, I think we are going to do this. And so as we got really close to the top our last night, you get that like giddy, ooh, we're going to actually do this. And so the filmmakers who were with us were kind of documenting this whole thing, and we came up with, I know this is completely politically incorrect. GIMP is not a nice word, but when you're disabled, it's a hysterical word. And so we actually call each other GIMP all the time. And so climbers do it all the time, especially the climbing partners I have who are missing limbs. Everybody calls each other that. A monkey in Yosemite, there's a group of climbers called the Stone Monkeys. And so they're a lot of friends of ours, but we didn't want to be just stone monkeys. We thought it would be funny if we were GIMP monkeys. And so we thought it was a funny little joke that we were doing on the wall. Well, the filmmakers kind of took it and ran with it, and they actually ended up titling this film GIMP Monkeys. So now you try sending that to sponsors as a subject line in your email, because you get a response like that. It's amazing. So these guys end up making this film on this ascent, and it was one of those things where I just realized, okay, so the circumstances that were shutting me down early on, that was part of the plan, that was part of the process. And those circumstances, had I let them define that part of my life, would have just stopped right there. I would have ended, it would have been fun, but I would have still been shut down. But the more I thought about it and the more I started to process it through, was we were successful there is just simply because it was dogged, we just kept going back and doing it. Finally, we were successful. Those circumstances weren't defining me. It was all part of that plan. And those guys who I climb with, none of those guys are Christian guys. They're just climbers who know everything about me. They're very respectful of who I am and what my family does and what I believe in, and I'm very respectful of them. But I feel like God puts those people in my life for a reason, and He puts them there as a catalyst for me to move forward down this path that He's laid out. And so the circumstances, it doesn't matter what they are. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. Some days leg falls off, some days you get to the top of El Cap. But those circumstances are fluid and they're changing, just like the circumstances for everyone in this room are changing. They're not what they are for the rest of your life today. Today is today. And once you get your head around that and realize that it's still part of that plan, good or bad, that plan is what defines you. Those circumstances don't define you. So just like if I had let this circumstance define me, I would have been that person. I would have been a disabled amputee, dad, husband, who became probably bitter and angry because I didn't like my circumstances, but I was letting them define who I was. Instead, I just figured it was easier and smarter to let God's plan define who I was, because then I'm defining who I am because I define myself by what that plan is. I define myself by that plan working in my life every day. And that plan is in place for everyone sitting here. It's, again, like I said in the beginning, it's not just me. Everyone in here is part of that plan. And so it's up to us to let that plan happen and then define ourselves by that plan, but also make the choice to follow that plan every day. Would you please stand with me? Father God, thank you so much for the people in this audience. Thank you so much for the circumstances in our life, the good ones and the bad ones, and the circumstances that are in our control and the circumstances that are not in our control and that we're just dealing with. And Lord, I ask you to be with everyone. I ask them to look for you, look for your guidance, look for the markers in your life, in their life, that you're going to put there, the people, the circumstances and the things that are going to come that they have no idea that are coming, the good and the bad, Lord, and just that they would seek you through that they would seek your plan through that, and have the courage to follow that plan, whether it's something that's in their comfort zone or out of their comfort zone, Lord, that they would follow you through that, look for you through that, and worship you through that, Lord. Amen.